All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the CX Chronicles Podcast. Super excited for today's show, guys. We have Tom Randle, CEO of Geckoboard, joining us. Tom, why don't you say hello to the CX Nation, my friend?
Hi guys.
So, guys, Tom is number one. He is part of a super cool business, super cool team, and he's here to share his story with us today. Tom, why don't you take the first couple minutes of today's show, man? Like we do with all of these episodes. Why don't you set the stage for our listeners? Give them a sense for how you got number one into the position that you're in today as the CEO of Geckoboard, but number two, give them a sense for some of the stepping stones that you took along your way, and how you got into this entire space that you're leading the charge at today.
Absolutely. So first, I'll give you a quick introduction of Geckoboard. So we are a dashboarding tool or product, and we make it really easy for leaders of B2B companies to create, also leaders of companies, often SMBs, to create dashboards of the most important metrics to help align the team, spot problems early, and we integrate with all the kind of various tools and things like Salesforce, Zendesk, Intercom, that kind of thing, to make it really easy to pull your data from all those places, get them in front of your team, get alignment, spot things that are interesting, build that culture around data. And so my background is quite unusual, I suppose. I took over as CEO last year, but I've been at the company 8 years,
Nice.
and I started my career in UX.
Okay.
So I did a degree in mechanical engineering. Actually, I've always been into computers. My dad worked in IT, and kind of during that time, I began to hear a little bit about it's always some engineers are engineers because I like maths and technical problem. I was an engineer because I liked designing solutions to problems, and so I was quite agnostic over how I applied that. And this was I was graduating back in 2000 and shit, I've forgotten, eight, I think. And I think that then, Web 2.0 was happening, all these great internet companies were being formed. And that seemed a bit glamorous than working in a kind of fairly old school engineering company. A lot of my friends are going to work in petrochemicals or energy, automotive, and that didn't really appeal to me. And I just kind of stumbled into a job at a really brilliant company based in Cambridge called Red Gate, and I kind of landed on my feet. I'd never heard of them before, but I saw the job role, and it looked interesting. And they were quite forward thinking. They didn't want someone who'd got a degree in UX design or information architecture and like that. They were like, they were acknowledged that there weren't many of those people at the time.
Well, it was
And they
probably
did.
new at that time too, right, Tom? That was probably like a newer type of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I guess they didn't really exist, and they were very forward thinking. And I applied on a whim really, and it kind of wooed me in their interview experience. The interview was very creative. I took a do some design exercises, got asked all sorts of questions, and I kind of just went with the flow and got the role there. And I was so lucky because the CEO, or CCOs actually, were very kind of progressive, and they really looked to sort of, we're based in Cambridge, a lot of quite stuffy businesses around at the time, but they really looked to the best in class. They were looking to Silicon Valley for inspiration. They were flying people out like Eric Ries
Nice.
really early
Yeah.
on, and like that really built an amazing culture. And also they tremendously valued uh, user experience and customer experience very early on. Like they were building quite boring, well, I say boring, but tools for DBAs and developers.
Okay.
But their slant on it was, or their kind of punchline was ingeniously simple tools. And they put a tremendous value on UX, and so I benefited from that. So I had a big UX team, really forward thinking, sent me on lots of conferences, and really instilled in me a great kind of user centric mindset. And for me as well, I was quite lucky. I joined the software world before waterfall. Like I was on agile from the off. All these great practices right there at the beginning of it, and I really loved it, and I got given a lot of responsibility early on. I very quickly ended up working on a big project to design a monitoring tool. My first foray into dashboards actually was building a
Nice.
dashboarding tool for DBAs to monitor their SQL servers,
Okay.
and huge amount of responsibility there. I got really into the data side of things as well, because having done a mechanical engineering degree, it's very, very numbersy. I mean, the
Totally. Yeah.
maths,
Yeah.
the maths really broke me, but
Well, and
I kind of
adding
got
the
there.
numbers and the UX part, man, that's probably what got you thinking about being able to take numbers and visualize numbers and do visualization. Normal people need help seeing numbers in a different type of usable way. So that's probably what got you started with that whole space.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I do like I'm weird. I kind of my interests are all over the place. Like I love design. I love things with people, understanding people, their problems, numbers. I love all that. I've always had a broad set of interests, and I think that design is probably problem solving and design have been the thing that kind of underpin all of that. But every job I've had since, and all my interests really kind of fall under, I guess, creative problem solving. And I see, even being a CEO today, that I mean, I guess perhaps creativity, maybe you have to stretch the bounds of what that means to some extent, but it's all about problem solving and designing solutions to, whether those are organizational or teams, to make progress, and I love that. So yeah, in that role, I also ended up. So I really kind of started reading up on information design, or sorry, data visualization, and um, kind of interesting things around like how you detect anomalies and that kind of thing, which also lent back to some stuff I learned in the manufacturing parts of my degree. But also, I ended up getting this. We had a period where there wasn't a product manager on the project, and I managed to kind of take on a little bit of the gap that left, and I really enjoyed that. And I think gradually, once that project moved on, I ended up having opportunity to do more product management. And I think at that point, I began a couple of years into my kind of design career. I kind of realized actually product management I really enjoyed, because I think I saw that still as design. Okay, maybe you're not
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
all the UI, but you're still very much trying to work out what is the solution to your customers'
Big
problems and what
time.
do they need.
Big time.
And I really enjoyed that. And I think, as a designer, it's very frustrating when you have a product manager you don't see eye to eye with as well. I think, it's quite nice to be able to not have that problem anymore as well.
Yeah,
It's
for
something,
sure.
I've worked with some great product managers, but also, a couple of times I was like, oh, I'm not sure I agree with you.
100%, man.
So part of that was always an eye up to like seeing where I thought I could add most value and think, actually, I'm really interested in this. And I think also I came to the realization that while I enjoyed the detail, I think I preferred the bigger picture stuff, and the strategy. Could never, once I started reading about that and hearing about it and seeing other people thinking about it, I wanted in. And I think that that's a theme, I guess, I see through my career, is that like where I always kind of tried to kind of uh, peek into the bits that I thought were interesting and get involved. And I've been lucky that I was given the opportunity to do that. So I guess fast forwarding, I kind of had a bit of a period where I was both a designer and a product manager. It's quite a hard role to fill, so I shifted more and more towards product management. Um, and then, so that's how I joined Geckoboard, and I was the second product manager there, and stayed a product manager for years. But at Geckoboard, we were growing company at the time. I think there were only about 15 people when I joined, and there was a lot, building a company, and I really got interested in the culture side of things, and having had such a great culture, or exposure to such great culture at Red Gate, and then a couple of, I've also seen less good side to that kind of after as well. I thought, God, yeah, this is something I'm really interested in. I'm really keen on helping forge Geckoboard's culture, and that was also something a lot of other people weren't interested in. So it was kind of a good combination, really. So I got more and more involved in that. So helping set our values and articulate those, really helping reinforce the kind of whole lean agile side things.
Yep.
And it was great. That was kind of naturally where the company was going, but it was just helping to reinforce it. And I gradually, well, Paul, our CEO, kind of at one point sat me down and kind of asked me where I wanted to go. And I think originally, if you'd asked, I thought, oh, eventually I might just double down on product, and like being a VP of product would be great. But actually, I think I realized that No, it's this more general role that I enjoyed, and like I was, I'd started getting a little bit more involved in marketing, kind of helping them with various releases, or
Nice. Yep.
like actually writing content for them. I'm a bit of a Google Sheets nerd, and I do like the blog posts and that kind of thing, or being a bit of a data nerd as well. I'd got a lot of ideas around kind of interesting data content.
Those are good skills. Those are good skills, Tom. Good skills to have, man.
Yeah, I think everyone benefits from writing, and I feel like I've maybe got worse over time. But luckily, I've got some really great writers. Well, I've got a particularly great writer now on the team. But yeah, I think writing is an incredibly important skill. But yeah, anyway, gradually got more exposed to marketing, and then we did a big. Well, in fact, then our VP of marketing left, and I transitioned to that point into like an operations role where I was working a lot with marketing, working a lot with CS, setting strategy, thinking about things like OKRs and everything. But I kind of ended up stepping into marketing for a while, whilst we hired a replacement, and that was a really interesting baptism of fire, which I think I enjoyed and both didn't enjoy at the same time. But I mean, I think it was an interesting one. But and then we went through a big rebrand. I ended up helping out with that because, again, like skills wise, I had design, marketing, project management, and help. And obviously I knew the company inside out, so I ended up being very involved in the big rebrand. Again, our VP of marketing, a couple of years down the track, our VP of marketing ended up going on maternity leave and decided not to come back. And so I ended up kind of stepping in there again once more to help marketing. And I'm still very much involved in marketing at the moment, actually. And the second time around has been a lot more engaged. I've not more fruitful, I think. I feel like I've learned more, and we've got a small but really good team there now. And it's been really great to have some wins on like inbound marketing and slightly more effective paid. And we've got some grand plans now for doing more brand awareness and demand generation, which I'm really excited about. And then, last year, basically, it was me and Paul had over the years a few conversations like, well, what if he ever wanted to step down? What would we do? Would I be interested? And I kind of said, well, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm ready for that. Thank you very much. But
it's a tough job, man, being at the top, right? It's everybody thinks it's like the dream stitch, but you've got a lot of things on your plate every single solitary day, right?
Yeah, I think throughout my life I've always quite liked being one step down, like the man behind, like putting the stick. So like, and I think, but I agree. I felt like it was an offer I couldn't refuse. I think very much like it wasn't something I ever planned or wanted, but posed. I think the ability to just like again, like I guess be responsible for it more and shape a little bit more our future. And I think perhaps like it's slightly different as well, being the CEO that comes in rather than the founder. Like you've got a little bit more. It's a bit less all-consuming. It's really, it is all-consuming, but it's not quite as emotionally consuming, I think, as being founder. So, sorry, I agreed when Paul kind of posed this to me last summer, and we kind of managed it. So we told team leads quite early on. I gradually kind of took on. He was still there. He's still our chairman, so I'm still regularly catching up with him and getting support there. It's great. But we kind of phased it. We told the team internally about a month in advance. But as soon as we told them, I was kind of then calling the shots. And it went smoothly. I think also, luckily, I was a continuity candidate rather than someone there to rip up the wheel and and start again. So that made my life easier. And it's been an interesting ride since, really. I think I guess like my first. Well, there's been all sorts. I think you definitely feel maybe a little bit more alone in the role. I think there are some things that ultimately you are now solely responsible for. I've had to think about money quite a lot more, which I don't particularly enjoy.
Sure.
Like, can we spend this? Can we spend that? All the budgeting, but you find yourself thinking about that a lot. But overall, I think I struggle with the public speaking side of things. I've never sought to do much of that, and it's not the thing I love most. But in terms of, I think, working with the team to develop strategy, working out where the big opportunities are, helping the team leads. I love that, and that's been really enjoyable for me. So far so good.
That's awesome, Tom. Well, number one, thank you so much for sharing kind of the setting the stage and sharing the story. I'd love for you to jump into the first CX Pillar team, man. Give us a sense for how the Geckoboard team was kind of built. And obviously you're a bit of an OG. You've seen all of it. You've seen the ebbs, the flows, and you said, when you started, there was 15 people. So you've seen the growth and you've seen the changes over the years. What does the team look like at Geckoboard? Give us a sense for sort of how you have the different players laid out on the pitch today.
Yeah, good question. So we're about 35 people now. The biggest team is product and engineering. They're about 20. The next biggest team is CS, and we have we're very support. Support rather than customer success at the moment.
Okay. Yep.
And we don't have a sales team. We have a small marketing team of soon to be 4 people.
Okay.
And we don't. That's kind of it.
Okay.
I hope I haven't forgotten anyone. And so we're quite unusual. We don't have a sales team, which I might elaborate on a little bit.
I was going to say, I got to ask you, how do you guys get away with growing the business and finding new customers and getting new logos and getting Geckoboard and all these different businesses without a sales team? How does that even work?
Yeah, well, so we've always invested in marketing, and almost all our leads for a long time now have been inbound. So organically searching for high intent keywords, or actually just recognize the name, because we've been around a while. We're 10-year-old startup. We have got relatively good brand recognition amongst certain segments. So there's a word of mouth element too. But it's really, one of our big USPs is that you as a leader, you've got this vision. You want to see your metrics. You feel like your company would benefit from greater data transparency. Maybe something bad happens and what are your numbers? No one spotted it for a while, and you're like, you don't want that to happen again, or maybe there's a lack of alignment over what your main objectives are and what your main KPIs are. And so you as a leader very much have this problem, but you don't want to kind of derail your team by getting them to go and pull all this data from these different tools and do that. So you want to be able to make progress on that yourself. And so one of the key things about the product is that we enable you to make progress. So you as a leader can very easily build a dashboard, all your most important metrics, in a couple of hours yourself. And so we didn't want to put any friction in the way there. And when we tried doing that, it kind of ended up somewhat alienating one of our USPs, is that it should be really easy to do this yourself. You want to kind of not call your engineers to come and build this yourself, or have to spend thousands of pounds using contractors, using contractors. So like this, we've always been built around a 14-day free trial, it was longer actually. We shortened it for various reasons, but we've always been built around a free trial, and kind of not wanting to add friction. And we're incredible. We're very much a product company. Our founder Paul, very much a product person. Our VP of product, my background in product, very kind of spiritually product, and it's the biggest team. And not having a sales team meant that we didn't have that kind of big pull in that kind of commercial direction. So
sure,
so a lot of the things we've done have always been very kind of product, and then I've repeated out there a little bit, but the other things are our pricing points as well. So we've always pitched ourselves more at the SME end of the market. So that means that we're not charging tens of thousands of pounds a year or dollars, to use Geckoboard. We want to be something that you can kind of spin up easy. We want to be relevant to that SMB audience, and so that doesn't really lend itself to an enterprise sales thing where your sales team are incentivized by high commissions. And so we've always taken so price point, the fact that ease of getting up, being able to get up and running yourself as a leader, and then also the product kind of angle to the company meant that we've always taken a very light touch approach. And we're very our support team actually help trialists, and answer pricing questions and things like that. We just don't have sales. We dabbled, but it didn't really work because we tried to apply an enterprise sales approach to something that just didn't lend itself to that.
Yeah. Tom, guys, I was telling Tom before when we were getting ready for the show. One of the companies that I helped to build in New York City, Tom, H Bloom. It was one of the country's fastest growing floral subscription companies. And I always tell people, no, I never thought I was going to be a flower salesman. But long story short, we were using Geckoboard for a really cool reason. We had one of the most beautiful floral studios in Manhattan. We were set up on West 28th Street and the West Side Highway. And we had this big, beautiful, like an old factory type of building that we took over to build our flower studio. And we had our delivery vans coming in and out of there and picking up flowers and bringing them to hedge funds and retail space, all these gorgeous places in Manhattan. And we would literally have our Geckoboards around the studio because it was one of the easiest ways that you could kind of keep track of deliveries that were going out, deliveries that were pending. We would keep pace of our actual progress for the day, right? Because people don't think about it, but like when you start to do $25 million of flower sales, that's a flower factory, right? And so to be just even daily progress or weekly progress or some of these orders that we would get with these huge national brands, you'd have 1,000 orchids that needed to be produced. And so we would use Geckoboard to be able to connect the studio with more of the startup-y part of our office where we were thinking about sales and marketing and support and success. And it was the easiest way that we could kind of connect the dots and kind of have our production team and our sales team and our support team seeing the same thing and kind of following the same pace for sort of what was happening. So it makes a ton of sense that you guys have been able to hit an excellent stride sort of with the SMB side and helping people that need help with visualization. That's the other part. I'm glad you called out the part. Some of the stuff's hard, right? Unless you already have a full-blown team of analysts, or you've already got some senior individuals that have spent much of their career building and visualizing and storytelling with data. Man, when you're starting a business, you're starting a company, it's hard. It's hard to see the important things. It's hard to socialize those matters with your team or your customers, depending on sort of how you're positioning things. But I love that you guys have been able to really kind of hit that sweet spot. Tom, go ahead.
So I think, for me, I think it is about feedback a lot of that as well. So, for a team to know how to be motivated, you need to be able to see what impact you're having. And there's no better way of that than having like these metrics that you understand beaming back to you in as close to real time as possible.
Tom, I'd love to jump into the second CX pillar, tools, man. Spend a couple of minutes talking about some of the tools that you guys have used to build Geckoboard. I know, number one, I know that you have integrations with a bunch of the world's leading tools, so I'm sure that's part of it. But what were some of the tools that you and the early team at Geckoboard had to kind of leverage and had to use to grow the business and to grow the customer portfolio and to be able to allow you guys to kind of keep the train on the tracks each and every day?
That's a good one. So we were quite early adopters of Intercom. And I think that made life a lot easier in terms of actually originally we were early days of that, and we implemented it to help the product team get in touch with customers. So a huge kind of part of the business is talking to customers. We try and talk to them as much as possible, and that's across the business, from engineering to marketing, CS obviously. And so Intercom really helped us with that because we could trigger messages both in-app, so we could just have chats, but also use that to fire up calls. We don't actually have, to this date, we don't have a more advanced CRM.
Okay.
And I am now beginning to wonder about that, because I think that one of the things we're looking into doing is implementing more of a customer success function and better nurturing our trialists, because at the moment, we think there's an opportunity there. So that's kind of the back on radar, is because I think Intercom, we're beginning to, I guess, hit limitations of what we're able to do there from what we want in terms of marketing, or more kind of not sales, but sales slant to it.
I understand.
Other tools, Mixpanel has been great to us over the years. We've used that to really understand how people use our product again, and actually some of the events there feedback into our Intercom triggers. I'd say those are really the concepts. And we obviously use things like Slack. We're very early adopters of that for internal chat. We hardly use any email. We're very early we're early adopters of Zoom as well, and that's been really key. We have some internal tools for helping us support our customers that we've built that enable you to kind of diagnose issues with their widgets. Our engineering team use tools like Honeycomb to help track down problems with technical issues people might be having with their integrations or just in the product. And if we host things on AWS, we use Google Docs. I guess we've always tried to lean towards using the best tools possible. We integrating all the partners we do as well. We try and make sure that we're even if we're not using in a production real sense internally, we'd try and make sure that we're up to speed with all the big players as well. So for instance, something like Salesforce, we have a Salesforce integration. It's really important to us, but we don't quite have the sales team to justify Salesforce properly. So we have that. But I think those are. I think it's easy to get beguiled by tools. I think I sometimes wince a little bit when I've been told we're using something. I think, oh god, why are we using that rather than this? But I guess the other big one I really like is Miro. It's a very simple product, but that infinite canvas, which is the core to it, is so handy for all sorts of things, whether that's, and particularly I guess working remote as well, being able to kind of real-time pan between that while you're on a call, and we use it for retros, and even we used it for when we do brand work and we want to kind of pull together all the things we have, all the assets we have right now and discuss those, or kind of even discuss design and stuff. It's really good for that. We use Figma in the design team as well. I mean, the design team is hard to keep up with all tools that they're always exploring, but I'd say those are probably the big ones. Obviously, we use things like GitHub and all those obvious kind of everything's run on AWS. But yeah, those are the big players.
That's awesome, and thank you for sharing that, Tom. I think one thing that you just mentioned though that I want to hit on is your comment about the CRM. I think it's funny, man. The more incredible customer focused business leaders like yourself that we get on the show, it's interesting. You hear that piece come up a lot, which is regardless of which CRM or customer relationship management tool a given company is using, it's funny, especially when you start to have some of the CX and the CS crowd coming on the show. The traditional best-in-class, industry-leading CRMs, they didn't necessarily think about CX or CS when they originally came up with the idea. Yeah, it's an excellent way of keeping your names and your contacts and your contact information, and maybe activities, and obviously documentation encapsulation where you can put your documents and your contracts inside. But what Tom just said right there, guys, about like the CS part, this is why you're seeing some of these other mega SaaS companies like a Churn Zero or a Qualtrics or some of these other solutions that or client success, like they're actually being built to help companies and to help business leaders think about the customer success piece, meaning understanding the lifetime value, understanding what has or has not happened with a given account, understanding flags for points of contacts or flags for accounts, whether those flags are good or bad, right? Like a good flag might be indication or a signal that somebody's ripe or ready for upselling and cross-selling. Bad flag might be something like customer just had a really bad situation with your business, might be a churn indication, right? It might be a possibility of churn, or they're going to go try to look at one of your market competitors. But it's funny, man. I think that it's interesting. I think that as we move forward into the future, I think you're going to see a shift. And I'm certainly not hating on Salesforce. Salesforce sells $20 billion a year of product, right? So they are obviously doing something exceptionally well, but it's going to be interesting because you're going to see, I think, emerging technology and emerging software solutions that do really help people think about the journey, right? The customer journey, and they help people understand all of the different facets of the journey. But more importantly, if you're thinking about going back to Tom's original point here, guys, like when you're growing a business and you're scaling a business and you're not at $1 billion mark yet, but rather you're trying to figure out how to put together the first 1 million or 5 million or $10 million of annual recurring revenue, you need to like have almost like a maniacal sense of attention towards the different milestone moments that matter to the customer, right? And when I say milestone moments, what are the things that are going to make them go talk about your brand or talk about your business, become a promoter, right? Like literally help, to Tom's point, maybe you don't even need a sales team if you've got an army of promoters telling the whole market about why you're the best. Or again, thinking about some of the different graduatory states, right? Like some of the different milestone moments where like they're literally, whether it's utilizing the tool or whether it's like pushing through to the 100th seat or whether it's just expanding their usability of a product. That stuff's going to be huge, guys. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see sort of where that market goes, Tom, over the next 5 and 10 years. And then I really do think that you're going to see more and more of these leading SaaS solutions very much focused on CS, very much focused on customer experience, maybe even employee experience too, where you've got some of the EX part baked into it. But this is huge, Tom, huge sharing that list. I'd love to dive into the third CX pillar, process, man. So as you guys have been building Geckoboard, and you just gave us a laundry list of the tools that you're using, how did you guys kind of manage and wrangle processes you were scaling the business and growing the business? Was there some tricks or some best practices, or maybe even some things that your team was doing to keep your playbooks and your process aligned as you were scaling?
We've always tried to be, I think there's a philosophy that underpins everything, which is we try and be lean. So we try and put stuff out early, get feedback, not work on huge projects that you're waiting till the last minute to see whether it's going to be effective or not. So learning is a key kind of fundamental kind of philosophy behind everything we do. We do quite a lot of work on strategy. So there's a really great book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy that we've kind of all read. And I think that trying to be really clear on what it is, what's the situation we're in, what's our slant on how we're going to overcome that. And we've always done a lot of work on that. We dabbled with OKRs, which didn't work for us, and I've got quite a lot of views on OKRs. I think that it's very easy to blame the framework as well, and there are lots of things about it. But I think what we struggled with it was that it too tightly coupled kind of the sense of success with. So for something to be successful, you both have to kind of execute on what you intended to do, but what you intended to do also has to have been the right thing. And when you're an early stage company, like what you're intending to do, what you're trying to achieve, there's risk to that. And that set by your entire company strategy. And when you try, like the whole spirit of OKRs though is very much that, or at least in some readings of it, is that the team ought to own the full-on outcome. And if the actual business result outcome wasn't successful, then that team needs to score themselves lowly, and ultimately they end up feeling bad about that. Whereas actually, like the reality of the matter is that like I am happy if the bet we kind of agreed as a company that we wanted to make wasn't successful, but the team did a great job of putting it out there, learning. Then we found it hard to make that work with OKRs, and that we didn't want everyone to be dejected because this maybe relatively risky approach we took, or this approach that it would take months to learn whether it was actually successful, and maybe we'd moved on by that point. We just really struggled with scoring it. It was a bit of a distraction. I actually think it's more useful to decouple those two things. So the team very much involved in setting strategy and the outcome, but you need to be evaluating the outcome differently from your execution. And so we've kind of abandoned it now. And also, it's a system that's designed for like Google, and they're a bit different to most companies. They're a lot bigger, and I don't think you need something quite so complicated. And I've had some very heated debates with some people I regard as being very clever about the minutiae of OKR practice and approach. And I think it's a bloody distraction. I think I'm a big fan of first principles, I think. And so that's what we've done. We've kind of gone back to first principles. We now use Coda to, every team has a little write-up of what project they're working on, why, what the outcome they're trying to achieve is. And then
I like that.
And then each week we update the status of it, and we share that in Slack, so you can see that like this project, this is the outcome, and this is what we're doing now, and everyone can follow that along. All these things need a little bit of shepherding and policing. I think the temptation can be like, the person usually writes it, it's off this week, or like, I forgot, and like it needs a little bit of pushing along. And I think it's very easy to neglect that, but it's really important. And I think this is the best we've got so far. I think we still need to work on making sure like all the meetings and follow-ups there, and it's not, you don't kind of, I think sometimes when a project maybe peters out and you kind of decided that actually this was the right thing to do, you make sure that you still write that up and you learn from it, and you've got that, that dossier of evidence. And also, when new people join, you kind of want them to understand why the hell you did something.
100%.
And like, we've maybe been a little bit sloppy there in the past. And I'm loath to go too documentation heavy. I think you can waste a lot of time on that, but I think we needed a little bit more. So that's what we're doing right now. What else do we do? We do, the way we build software is very agile. We have kind of weekly planning. We don't bother with estimation or anything like that. It's a waste of time. But that's really core. We run retrospectives.
Nice.
We have daily stand-ups. I think since we've become remote or remote first, the stand-ups have maybe kind of in some teams stretched out a little bit to be a bit more social, because that's kind of, it's a point where you actually get to have your small talk. You don't
100%. It's your team time in a remote world. It's the time that you literally get to kind of chat with the team and brainstorm and come up with ideas.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really important. We have an all hands once a month where each team kind of presents what they're doing and why. That's kind of the key processes. I think things like in CS, we do other stuff as well. So we use Klaus to evaluate support tickets, which I think has been really, really valuable. And there are other kind of microprocesses around the business. And when we have an outage, we have a post-mortem and that kind of thing. So there's lots of really good techniques there. And we're very much, one of our core values as a business is to not be stuck in our ways and to always consider new ways of doing things and improve that, and we're always doing that.
I love it. So a couple of things, Tom, that I think is super important for the listeners. Number one, I'm glad you called out, like, OKRs were developed by Google, right? So if you're a 35-person company or a 35,000 person company, the way that you need to think about objectives and key results and goals and progression towards goals is going to be different, right? When you're a 35 person team, there's all these different things you can be doing. But I think the most important thing that Tom just highlighted for us, guys, is like doing something, right? Whether it's stand-ups, whether it's your end of week reporting. I love the idea that you just said, Tom, where your team is minimally once a month, you have each department head, making sure that you're getting up in front of an all hands and you're having those guys and gals share their story, talk about who the A players are that are driving the progress, talk about some of the fundamental pieces that you're hoping to accomplish from focusing on those things. But lastly, the last part that you just said, man, that I couldn't agree more with is like, when you have people joining your business, joining your team, maybe you have people moving different roles. It's very common for great, excellent employees that maybe they bounce around. Maybe they start in marketing, but then they move to sales, or maybe they move to success. But think about it. What Tom just highlighted for us, guys, that's one of the easiest ways that you share that tribal knowledge. It's one of the easiest ways that you share the gains of all the different things that your teams and your departments are working on. But more importantly, I've always said it like this, Tom, this is one of the easiest ways that you can help your team load their lips around all the incredible things that your business is doing. And regardless of what your position or regardless of what your team role is, when you're talking with customers or you're working with customers or you're helping your customers throughout these different things, man, the some of the best organizations, they've got their employees' lips loaded at all times. They know what's happening on the sales and the marketing efforts. They know what's happening on the product side. They have a sense for what's happening with support or success. And I just think it makes for such a better brand experience, both on a customer experience lens and an employee experience lens, right? Because employees like being at companies where they feel included. They feel like they're involved. They feel like they're informed, right? Like that's a fun place to be. So, sometimes when you're working at a place where you're kind of always in the dark and there's only like 2 or 3 people doing all the talking, you kind of start to wonder. You kind of start to wonder what's going on. So I love that you call that out.
It's really important to me that everyone in the company has a good sense of what's going on and why. Like I hate the notion that you're in your department and you don't care about what marketing is doing, we hire people who are interested in that kind of thing, and I think it's really important to cultivate. The other thing I do actually that I kind of introduced was I write an update once a month as well, where I go through all the financials, I explain what projects are going on, I talk about a strategy, and we're hyper transparent with all our financials internally, so everyone's got a good sense of that, the reassurance that builds. And I think it just helps again explain where like I'm coming on, the team is coming from when we talk about different projects or timelines of things. And I enjoy doing that. I kind of quite, it takes maybe a day a month, but I find it and it also helps me actually like digest my thoughts and like
for sure.
And I'm lucky that I think that we're the size and the fact that I was in the engineering team, I was in the marketing team, I've worked really close to CS. I've still got quite a good, like, it doesn't take much for someone to kind of say and paraphrase what they're doing for me to have a pretty good understanding as well. So I can also, when I spot that people don't understand stuff, I can kind of make sure they talk to each other, or there's like a gap in terms of understanding over what one team's doing versus another.
I love it. I love it. Tom, let's dive into the fourth and the final CX pillar, feedback. Spend a minute or two talking about, you kind of hit on this earlier when you're talking about the process side, but how has the team at Geckoboard really kind of leveraged some of the customer feedback that you've gotten over the years? And then I'd love to also know kind of how you guys have leveraged some of the employee feedback. And I imagine on the product side for you and the UX side for you early on, you guys probably had a ton of different ideas that you were seeing, feeling, hearing, usability. You mentioned Mix Panel. So you're probably looking at literally the ways that people were clicking or scrolling or what the heat maps look like. But spend a minute or two talking about feedback. How have you guys really kind of thought about feedback as you scale the business?
So the most important type of feedback we do is customer calls. We spend a lot of time talking to customers. I would say that we probably, on average, a week do across the company maybe half a dozen customer calls.
Nice.
And we have that continually going. We have automated comms, so when certain customers reach certain stages in their lifestyle, maybe like a month after subscribing, and we'll do that, and we'll also do batches as well.
Okay.
And then we do different types of calls with those. Some of them will be we like jobs to be done at Geckoboard. It's one of the frameworks we use, and there's a very good style of interview that we run sometimes to try and understand ultimately like what the triggers and pulls, what is it that fundamentally trying to do. We love that, but we also do kind of very targeted usability kind of research as well. So if we know that we want to make an improvement to certain integration, or we think there's a big problem with the product, we'll focus in on that. So we'll try and find people that are using that and learn from them. And so it's great. Like, they're so uplifting. In fact, like, I find that even now as CEO, that like if I go like a few weeks without having done one of these calls, I feel like I'm out of touch. I need it.
You feel like you're missing stuff.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. So we do it, and we try and get we try not to overwhelm the calls, but we'll always have at least two people on the call so that we're kind of making the most out of it. And we incentivize customers sometimes, Amazon vouchers and stuff for their time. So that is fundamentally the most important. We obviously, being a data company, we have a lot of data to look at as well, and that's really important from kind of product analytics, looking at conversion funnels, that kind of thing, through to kind of more financial data as well. We don't use heat maps. I don't like them. I've never found them really work, and we try not to be too kind of invasive with the tracking we do. And then what else we do? We don't really do focus groups or anything like that either, because I think that we find that it's just much better to talk to people one-on-one. There's definitely an art to it. I think that you can sometimes see that maybe you can over literally interpret what someone's saying rather than actually see what they want rather than what they're saying. I think that there's a bit of a skill there, and maybe a couple of times we've maybe gone a bit wrong there, but I think that's something you get through experience. What else do we do? We do the occasional customer survey, and they can be really useful for certain things, because there are certain things. Actually, with Geckoboard, for instance, a lot of the consumption is on TV dashboards in your office, and so you don't get data for how many people are looking at it on the wall, and so it can be useful to answer certain questions like that. What else do we do? So internally, I do skip level one-to-ones with the whole company, try it every 6 months or so. We do regular one-to-ones, we do retrospectives. I'm always trying to keep an open door with suggestions in terms of, this didn't work well, or I don't think this meeting format's that well, that kind of thing. As I said, in CS, we use Klaus to evaluate kind of how we've done in support tickets. What else do we do? I'd say those are the core things we're doing.
Those are fantastic. Tom, look, this is so many awesome ideas, so many different ways for our listeners to kind of take back to their own teams and their own businesses around some of the things that you guys have done at Geckoboard. Number one, huge thank you for sharing the story and really kind of highlighting all the incredible things that Geckoboard's doing to tackle the 4 CX pillars today. Before we let you go, my friend, where can people find out more about Geckoboard, and where can people get in touch with you or your team if they're interested in learning more about how they can start using Geckoboard today?
Great. So geckoboard.com is where to go to find out more about the product. I'd urge you to sign up for a trial first, because you can get up and running very quickly yourself. But our support kind of contact details are all on the website everywhere. And then if you want to get in touch with me, I recommend hunting me out on LinkedIn. That's where I'm hanging out these days. I've given up on Twitter. I think LinkedIn's where it's at. So yeah, very happy to. If anyone's got any interest in talking about metrics, process, running, a SaaS business or anything like that, I love networking. It's something I'm trying to do more of, and I think in this kind of remote world, it's harder. So I would absolutely love to chat to anyone about anything like that.
100%. Well, Tom Randle, CEO of Geckoboard, thank you so much for joining the CX Chronicles podcast. I'll be sure, Tom, to put those links in our show notes too, so that people can find you guys. But absolute pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thanks so much for having me.